Good day. This is a Devar Torah on Parshas Mikeitz, which, as in many years, and I'll talk about them more in a minute, coincides with Shabbat Chanukah. And first, to give a summary of Parshas Mikeitz, exactly 2 years to the day, Mikeitz, this is where the Parsha gets its name. Pharaoh has a dream, two dreams, which are really one, and the first pasuk says, "Vihi Mikeitz Shanatem Yamin Pharaoh Kolam Hine Omed al Yoer." It happened at the end of 2 years to the day. Pharaoh was dreaming. He was standing over the river, and then he had a dream that he was watching the scene over the river where he saw seven cows on a river, which was being the Nile, and they were very healthy cows. Then seven more cows came up that were very thin and very gaunt looking. When he describes the dream of Yosef, he goes into this in even more details. They swallow the healthy cows and it doesn't look like they eat anything. Same one sheaf of wheat comes up with seven healthy, one stalk to seven healthy spots of wheat, and seven um, looking parched come up afterwards. And they swallowed these seven healthy ones, and it doesn't look like they've had anything. Pharaoh woke. That was the second dream. Pharaoh woke up. He tried to have all his magicians, necromancers, everybody tried to, wise men. None of them give an explanation he felt was satisfied. Hashem then put in the head of the wine servant that had forgotten Yosef for 2 years to, we would say that he had met a Hebrew, a young slave. He put him in the most negative terms possible that can interpret dreams. Yosef was brought out. He interprets the dreams that they're really one dream. And the reason it's shown, and what it means is there'll be 7 years of plenty, after which there'll be 7 years of fast, of famine. And he explains to Pharaoh the reason it's two dreams, he sees it twice in two different forms. The cows and the wheat was to say that Hashem's planning to do it very quickly. Yosef then gives his proposal of what should be done. Yosef follows that. Pharaoh says, "Can we find anybody better than him?" He makes Yosef second in command. Only the Pharaoh himself is higher. And on top of that, he's given a wife named Asnat, according to some, the daughter of Potiphar and his wife. According to some interpretations, the biological daughter, according to others. It's the child that was produced by the incident between Shem and Dinah, who was sent down to Egypt, had a special medallion. And they were having two children, Ephraim and Menashe, which Yaakov's ultimately going to treat as tribes. And Yosef stores all the wheat, takes over Egypt, and 7 years of plenty, that the famine begins, and Yaakov then suggests that the 10 of his 11 sons go down. He doesn't trust Benjamin after what happened to Yosef, the only other child he had from Rachel. And they go down. Yosef detests them, remembering his dreams, accuses them of being thieves, spies, which in real sense is true because, as we'll see in Parsha Shlach, they came back as Ebuz, came back as a Gilgal into the 10 spies, but left them when they started doing the wrong thing. In any event, yeah, Yossi puts him in jail for 3 days. Then allows Shimon, who was one of the people plotting against him, leaves him in jail, says, go up, but don't come back unless you bring your youngest brother. After much, much persuading, Yaakov agrees to it reluctantly. They go down, and everything seems to be fine. And then Yosef, as they're about to leave with the grain, tells one of his sons, put my beaker, which was also a sort of avodah zarah device to detect things. And they come after him, and Benjamin is in his bag, and Yehuda, and this is the final test, Yehuda says, let him go up to his father, otherwise his father will die, I will take his place. And that's where the Parsha ends. Now, Vigash, between Parshas, normally a blank area in the Torah scroll. Here they go one after the other. There's no gap. Whereas next week's Parsha is really a continuation of this Parsha. Now, in most years, last year was an exception, happens occasionally, Parshas Mikeitz always comes out on Shabbat Chanukah. And what I like to do is give some explanations behind it. Now, one of the simpler explanations, and it's an amazing connection, is that at the end of every Parsha, most Kamashim, it announces how many Pesukim verses there are. And after that, they, and then make some kind of simon, we remember that. In any event, Mikeitz is unique, that not only does it tell you how many Pesukim, it tells you how many words. Now, what is the number of words? It's only partial it happens, is 2025. Now, to explain this is going to be relevant to the rest of this Torah too. There is such a thing, and that the Hebrew letters also have numerical values. For example, Aleph is 1, Kaf is 20, Kuf is 100. Each one represents it. And so much can be derived from what's called gematrias, taking the different words, while adding their values together and equating them to other things with the same value. Now let's look here on this 2025. Now the gematria of the word ner, which means light. We have by the end of Hanukkah, we're going to have 8 lights, remembering the 8-day miracle of Hanukkah. And the Nun, which is the first letter, is 50. And Resh, that's how it's spelled in Hebrew, is 200. So 200 plus 50 is 250. Now there are 8 lights, the final day. So 250 times 8, I'll save the mathematics, is 2,000. And you see that's where we get to 2,000 words. And we're about to 25. That's telling us that the Yontif of Hanukkah starts on the 25th of Kislev. Now that's one connection. In itself is very powerful. Now I'm going to be bringing a couple more explanations that are from the author Magala Amukot. He was a famous Rav in the 1500s. And he was an incredibly brilliant man. On his cover, on his headstone, it says he learned with Eliyahu, which means Eliyahu on the V. His full name was Natan Shapira. Another time I'll share some incredible stories with you. I'm based in Krakow in the late 1500s. And he definitely had Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, and could also know some things that were going in Shemayim that an ordinary individual with heaven that could not calculate now or understand now. And it says at the beginning, Yehi Mikeitz Shabbat Yamim. Here, Yamim can also mean years. So at the end of 2 years to the day, that's when Pharaoh had his dream. Another word, Mikeitz, has in it the word kites. And as we know from Eov, that the Galut, the third Galut, Yavar, Greece, the ones who were involved in the Hanukkah story, covered over the eyes of Israel with their gezerot. What were they trying to do? They were trying to get the Jews, first of all, chas v'shalom, to a man and learning Torah. There was three mitzvahs which were anathema to them that they also stopped, which were the mitzvah of Brit Milah. The second one was observing of the new moon was another one. And commemorating Rosh Chodesh, in other words, dedicating a day when the new month occurred. These the first one, oh, I'm keeping Shabbat. The first one with Bris Miller is because the Greeks thought that the physical body was the ultimate and the male physical body even more so than the female um, put so therefore touching in any way was destroying perfection. That was against Bris Miller. Keeping Shabbat, recognize that there's time for Hashem. That, in other words, it's not time. It's not an impersonal thing. Even more so with Rosh Chodesh, saying that time has a rhythm and God's running it, not man. And learning Torah also. Now, he then goes on to explain that the horn of the shore does not have a halak and God of Israel. Without going into all the details, but what it is explaining is that we were already attacked. Why? Because the king Binez Batalmi, he was a Melech of Greece. Now, to explain the symbol Daniel for the third exile, the Greek exile, was a leopard with four heads. Why? Because it spread, and with wings, because it spread over most of the known world, excepting Rome, but it is spread over most of the known world. Alexander's conquest went to in parts of India. They didn't conquer the rest of India and China because his troops, after 20 years of constant warfare, demanded they go back. But this Malchus of Rishoyim, 470 of the Torah sages, each in a separate room to translate the Torah into Greek. There was a problem because certain things would have offended the king. So they had to figure a way of putting it. By a miracle, Hashem gave all 70 Torah scholars divine inspiration. And they came up with the exact same meaning. And we learn when it says that the shore, the Karen of the shore, the one of the shore, can always be Muad. We're comparing the shore to the Greek kings. And however, so how does that fit into Hanukkah? That explains. It says in Sefer Eov, and the exact chapter is 28, Pasuk Gimel. Kafket Gimel 28, 3, and it says, meaning Hashem, Kites Sham Lechoshik Lekol Techlit Hu Hoker Evan Ofel B'Samavet. He made an end to darkness, and every end he fathoms the stone of darkness, shadow of death. And then tells how things burst forth. That was just as flows. And anywhere, in any event, the word Mikeitz, which means the end, and Mikeitz means from the end until the end. Therefore, there is a connection to Hanukkah. And despite the enemy of Greeks and what they made us do, translating our Torah into Greek, we still ultimately triumphed over them, as it says in this pasuk in Eov. That was the end of darkness. You know, why is Greece darkness? Because what was the original concept? The Greeks had a sense of beauty, but they were supposed to be an intent of Shem, from which the Jewish people descend. However, Greece broke away from that, took on this human-centric view, denial of God as we understand him, and that created all kinds of havoc. And when he wanted to translate the Torah, what they doing is just treating it like another book of knowledge, nothing particularly, nothing divine about it. But we see in this pasuk in Eov that there's an end to that, and that's what we see with the story of the Maccabees and the triumph, where the oil was lit. They managed to break into the temple. It took them years to liberate the rest of Jerusalem and all of what's now Eretz Israel. And there was the miracle of the 8 nights, and therefore that was a light into the darkness. And it's apropos that this time of year, which at least in the northern hemisphere is the shortest days, most darkness, less light, we have this spiritual light, and the light is the what's called the organos, and the hidden light that was in the first 6 days, and which we'll see again in Zman Mashiach. By looking at those candles, we'll actually see, or lights, we'll actually see that. Now, another explanation he gives, it says, or Yemei HaMelech Yavan, it explains the Keichel Yosef, coming from the gate of Yosef. What is the gematria of Melech Yavan? Well, Yosef's gematria is 10, is Yud, Vav is 6, that's 16. 16 and 16 and 60 is 76. And before that, let me give you the Melech Yavan. That's 70, 90, and it comes out to 136 in both cases. And Yosef's gematria also comes out to that. It's both come out to the same gematria, 156. And that's telling us Yosef is connected, that just like we see the Shaul, later king, his gematria of his name is against that of Agav Melech Amalek, and I'm not going to do the whole calculation. And what does that teach us? That, among other things, that all of our enemies are tied into us in a connection. We have to battle against all of them. And there's four, as explained in Parshas Mishlei, that there are four types of metals, and this is not said specifically by the Amukot, Magala Mukot, that each one of those four metals represents one of the exiles, as seen in chapter 2 of Sefer Daniel. This is something I'm adding, and therefore the they represent on a deeper level the four exiles. And he then goes on to explain there's such a thing as klipot, spiritual impurities. One is called the klipa noga, which can be used for either good or bad. Like Greece could have been good if it followed us instead of rebelling against God. And what do they represent? They represent the four different types of klipot. No, and he says that's a remez to the words tohu, which represents the Babylonian exile, bohu, which represents the Persian exile, hoshek, and the last one is ruach al tahom. And we go against all of those. And what is the connection with? So the connection is we're going to beat all of those, but how does it connect to Hanukkah with our parsha? Because the gematria of Yosef, as I said, is equal to that of Melech Yevon. And as we're going through this Shabbat Chanukah, may we realize and see the shine, the light, the brightness of holiness, the brightness of spirituality, which even with much of the darkness we've seen over the pit since October 7th of last year, Hashem is performing miracles for us every year. And I would like to dedicate this year as an Elias Neshama for the Barabas Mordechai, who recently had her Shloshim. Good Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom, a Freilich Hanukkah and Hanukkah Sameach.